The question is pornography a real thing among God-fearing, and it's ... but I would say among God-fearing people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like substance abuse, and other issues. Pornography is real. And
so how would that... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How would that affect a relationship from a professional standpoint? How does that, affect a relationship for someone who is married down to the guy who, or female that is single and alone and finds this as a release?
Well, let me start by just saying something that I shared with my son, because I know it's real, and I know that a lot of times that is definitely something under the bro code that's like a cool thing to do. When you're coming into puberty and even as adult men, and now more accepted than ever. But something I told my son was, you want to be careful about what you're accessing with your eye gates, particularly when it comes to the sexual things that the enemy uses to entice one. Because when you become, and this is applicable across the board, which I've worked with couples who one or the other of the partners had an addiction to pornography. What happens is you then set your expectations based on what you're seeing happening through pornography, whether it is still shot pornography or triple X rated engaged intercourse with pornography, and there's a lot of deviance that happens through that, and so that deviance then enters into the spirit and has a tendency to influence one's own sex drive. And so then a person can have expectations of their own partner that are within that deviant place. Now, deviance means different things to different people. And so when I'm using the term deviance, I'm referring to things that might cause harm and cause a person to compromise their identity, their integrity, their character, and of course their relationship with Christ, their integrity with Christ. But this is the thing about sex, which is why why I believe God set that boundary, that it is meant for a husband and a wife, and the marriage bed is undefiled. Consent is necessary, even between a husband and wife. Consent is necessary. You don't get any privilege of taking over someone else's body, whether you're married or not. Force is force, abuse is abuse, and no means no.
Let me just stop you for one moment, because men will use certain scripture to blur those boundaries. I'm trying to see how I can phrase this, to blur those boundaries, because the Bible does say for men and for women that your body is not yours, but it is your partner's. I mean, that goes both ways, in scripture, and that a woman must submit to her husband. And even in counseling, premarital and postmarital, I've even heard the term of having, and I'm trying to bring it back up, being a willing participant. Being a willing participant, even if you're not, and that could work both ways. If you're not interested at the time, being available to be a willing participant. So, talking about blurring those lines and so what is, you said it's consent. So how does that scripture apply? If I'm a man and I'm saying, well, the Bible say that your body don't belong to you, but it belongs to me.
Well, then I would respond, and because this is how I work with my couples, we start with the fundamentals. You love your wife as Christ loves the church. So if you love your wife the way that Christ loves the church, the way that he loved us, that he loved us so much, God loved us so much, he sent his only begotten son, allowed him to be crucified for us. He loved them that much. If you love your wife the way that Christ loves the church, then you're not going to want to hurt her. You're not going to want to take advantage and abuse her and force her because of your own physical needs to engage in something or engage in sex that is unbecoming to her in a particular time. Then the flip side of that, what I'm saying to my wives is, your husband's nature. He's a man, and a man's sexual nature is much more active most of the time and demanding than it is of a woman. Than what we as women experience. And that really depends on where we are with hormones and all of those things, the testosterone, where we are in that whole process of the life spectrum. Because there are times for women where I think we are definitely more hungry for sex than men. But nonetheless, we put those two things together. So wife, if you love your husband and you don't want him to be at risk of being drawn to another woman who is willing and available, then take into consideration that the expectation is that the sexual needs be met. So you put those two things together, that husband, love your wife, be honorable of her, be respectful of her, and wife, be considerate of what his needs are. And that's that part in that premarital counseling that's really critical. Know what you're signing up for. If you know you don't like sex, if you know you're not going to want to have sex, you know you're not going to want to please